Today is the 25th of September. It's the Audit and Finance Committee meeting. We'll call it to order. There are two members present, John Perkins and myself. Heather Wiley is unavailable today. She had a conflict, but she expressed her regrets. And in the room, we have Megan Ward, Tom Scannell, Charlie Bissell, Andrew Frazier, right? Get that right? Zach Walker, and Melissa Cabrera. There we go. Thank you. I appreciate that help. That's all. Not a problem. Not a problem. But I'll eventually get it right. So, all right. So that's who we have here. And first of all, Councilman Perkins, would you like to make a motion for the approval of the minutes from August 7th?
I will make the motion for approval of the minutes.
All right. And I guess I'll second it since nobody else is here to second it. So without any objection, we will call those approved. All right. Which takes us to Mr. Frazier, Independence Communications Center review. It's kind of, last time you did a preliminary discussion of that, but this is kind of your final version, if I'm correct, and so you're going to bring us up to speed and update us on any changes or anything of that nature, I'm assuming.
Yeah, that's correct. So with this, I'm not going to rehash the entire slideshow from previous. I did make a few additions, which we'll see here. You guys were kind of asking about a little bit more data, so I included that here. The objectives were still the same, methodology was still the same. So this was a new one. Dispatching, how the calls come in. So this graph shows the different methods in which calls come into the communication center. It should be noted that just because someone contacts the communication center or dispatch with these methods, it doesn't necessarily generate a dispatch or a calls for service or an incident number. Citizens often contact the communication center for various reasons. For example, they communicated to me that they often call the non-emergency line for like trying to get a hold of IPL or somewhere local within the city. So there's quite a few non-emergency, as you can see, calls that come in through the communication center.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Andrew, I'm intrigued by the text, the 911 text. How does that work?
Yeah, so they have a text mechanism there that allows them to receive those. I don't know the text number offhand, but yeah, that's there.
Wow.
Do we respond back by text too? I mean, how does that back and forth communication?
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, or calling, yeah, texting or calling. It really, I'd imagine it probably depends on the nature of the call. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah.
Can't help but notice the text amount is pretty small.
Yeah, it's
But if any,
non-traditional.
it's hard to tell there. But
It's incredibly small compared to the non-emergency line.
right.
All right.
Is there a way to decrease the non-emergency calls so that, I mean, because that's got to eat up a lot of their time.
I would imagine so. And that's a great question. I'm sure there's many different ways we could do that, but maybe getting our voices heard, saying, "Hey, if you're trying to contact the city, maybe call this other number instead of the 911 non-emergency line."
Yeah, Mr. Walker, maybe something for the communications folks, or maybe police. I don't know, somebody to work on.
Very good idea. I will tell you, interesting timing. Last week, Councilmember McCandless and I had an opportunity, she's joined you, by the way. We had an opportunity to attend Southwest Independence neighborhood meeting. And some of those folks that live in that area of the city, when they call 911, are connected to Kansas City's 911 call center. So they have begun to use that non-emergency line as their mechanism to connect with Independence Police or Fire.
They must get that when they're calling on the cell phone.
Yes, correct.
So interestingly enough, yesterday at the MARC meeting, they had a presentation, MARC board meeting. They had a presentation that said they are introducing new technology to better target where those kinds of calls are routed.
Interesting.
So I don't think it didn't sound like they were just deploying it. I mean, like in the last couple of days.
Oh, interesting.
But not across the. I mean, they're doing it a piece at a time.
Sure.
Town. So so hopefully that will be something that will solve the situation a little bit, maybe.
Yeah, and I will also discuss with the public safety chiefs any other impressions they have about that call volume and any opportunities to decrease that.
Okay, good. Thank you. Sorry. No. Go ahead, Tom.
Thank you. Andrew, with the non-emergency number, can you walk through what that looks like? Me as a person who has a non-emergency calls that number and give that information. It seems to be kind of a mixed bag with some of my constituents because they're in that kind of maybe gray area that something's happening, but it's not emergency.
Sure.
And don't want to boggle down, respectively, not the emergency line, but in essence, they should have done the emergency line
Yeah.
instead of the non-emergency line.
Yep, that's fair. And I think that probably happens more often than not elsewhere. But during that call, the call taker or dispatcher will have, you know, their software up, and they can basically change that call type to if an incident is occurring and up the priority, or you know, make those adjustments as necessary.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. You can
All right.
move on.
So this graph is the number of IPD calls and incidents. Those are two different things that they track. The number of calls represents 123 different types or categories of calls that the communication centers categorizes. Obviously, this includes medical, fire, criminal stuff, and animal-related things. There's quite a bit of data. They have it on all 123 types. Again, you can see the number of incidents generated from those calls. So for instance, when an officer responds to an assault call, for example, the officer may discover like a drug offense or stolen property offense, and that would then, at the communication center level, generate further incidents within that call. And from my experience, that happens quite a bit as well.
Is any of that just something that, an incident, would that be something that they might see where they're driving around and would that, you know,
Like a traffic stop?
well, or you know, see something suspicious or whatever? Would that be, yeah, proactive?
Yes.
policing, Would that?
Yeah, so it would come out as a traffic stop, and then, you know, if the investigation continues and they just discover those other offenses, it would definitely generate more incident numbers with that. And similarly with the PD, the fire department, they track both of those as well. Similar occurrences can occur on the fire departments in their scope. The number of calls here represents 101 different types or categories of calls. that the fire department responds to. And you can see the incident numbers kind of even. 2022 had more incident numbers. I suspect that had to do with COVID.
Be my guess. PD was the same, it was more in 20 as well.
And I suspect they attached a COVID alert or incident to their calls whenever they responded. Any questions on the fire department? I mean, for example, fire department could go respond to a traffic accident, and maybe when they get on scene, they discover that maybe a utility was hit or something, and they would forward that up to the communications center, and that would generate another incident in the same call. This is the AMR calls. This data also has IPDs and the fire's medical calls for comparison, and they often respond to the same call. When the communication center receives a medical call, they transfer that call to AMR, who obviously processes and dispatches accordingly. In some instances, a police or fire-related call may subsequently require medical assistance. Again, the dispatcher would then contact AMR directly to request medical support at the scene. So if a vehicle pursuit ends in a crash causing injuries, all three of them are probably going to respond, to be honest. And when the police and fire respond to medical calls, it's obviously tracked at the communications center. But I got this data from AMR. Any questions on that?
No, thank you.
All right. Animal service. So this data was provided by Health and Animal Services Department between 2019 and 2023. I guess there was some changes on how the calls were managed. The Animal Services Division uses a separate logging system than the Communications Center, and they don't integrate. When the communication unit passes a call to Animal Services, because that oftentimes happens, somebody will call the non-emergency line for an animal service type call. They'll then pass it to the Animal Services Division. In 2023, the communications unit implemented a policy of entering only those animal-related calls into their systems if it met specific call-out criteria. And additionally, it's important to note that fire and police sometimes respond to animal-related calls, and those are tracked by the communications unit. Any questions on those? This is all the previous data minus the incidents. So all the call data just stacks to give just so you can see them all together. As you can see, I mean, it's relatively stable, a few dips. 2020, pandemic. So yeah, any questions on that? Pretty straightforward stuff. And that's basically it. If you wanted a breakdown of the 120 different types of policing or 101 fire, I could certainly get that for you. It's actually quite fascinating, but yeah, that's basically it.
So your recommendations, did they change at all?
No, this was just a supplement to everything, essentially, in that report. And the recommendations are completely the same.
All right, great. Okay, anything, John? All right, we appreciate that update, and
no problem.
we'll dig in to the, recommendations. Let Mr. Walker and team take a look at that, and we'll go from there. Okay, good. Next thing up is the 2023-24 year-end financial presentation. And go ahead, Megan.
Yes, so we have nothing new to report. Just wanted to give you guys time to ask any questions or make any comments, since last time it was just a long presentation and a lot of information.
There's a lot of good information, a lot of positive information.
Yes, it's a good year.
I don't have anything to add unless there's anything significant that we've met.
Sorry, no, sir. I think nothing has changed from last time, and it's looking good. We're gearing up for the audit right now, so you'll get the official audit around December. So that'll take us a few months, but it's starting right now. So we'll dive deeper into those for you.
I did have a thought that relative to the financial reports, just the monthly financial reports. And that being that, I know that we get them here with Audit and Finance, but does the rest of the council receive those regularly?
I don't believe so. We have a shaking head. So
That's
I mean-
kind of what I thought. So I guess what I would like to ask is that when the month is closed out, that all the council receive that by email, those reports by email, so that, if they want to look into them, they can to a greater detail, so that when they have questions, they can maybe refer to them. I just think that's a good thing for the council to have on a regular basis.
completely agree. Yeah, we already have it ready, so happy to send that on.
I didn't think it would be very hard for you.
No, happy to do that.
But I mean, I know you have the open access material and all that, but I think seeing the financial reports and kind of having them come into the inbox is at least a mechanism to kind of think about them a little bit.
Yes, sir.
that way.
We can do that.
Okay. All right. Well, then, if there's nothing, I know we intended this meeting to be a shorter meeting anyway, so if there's nothing further on that, we'll move to new business, which is, first thing is 2025 transit proposal. So, Mr. Scannell, we're anxious to hear what you have to tell us.
Good afternoon. So yeah, I'm going to give an overview of our proposal for transit going forward. As has been discussed through budget process over the last several years, transit costs have been going up, and revenues and federal funding has not kept up with the cost associated with transit. So first, what I want to do is kind of give you an overview of the transit that we currently provide. We have a fixed route intercity service. These are this is the service that's operated by First Transit. These are the buses that you see that drive by this building here. They coordinate or meet up at the transit center across the street from City Hall. We also have a fixed route intercity service. So this is a bus that operates by KCATA and goes between Independence and downtown KC-Mo. We offer both intercity ADA and intra-city ADA. The intercity ADA operates between the city limits of Independence and goes into KC-Mo. Intracity ADA just operates within the city limits of Independence. We also have intracity non-ADA. Non-ADA is the senior paratransit. So you have to qualify via age for that, and that is a service that we provide. All of these services are operated 6 days a week, Monday through Saturday.
On the paratransit, how does, I mean, define that for me if you would. Do they pick them up at their house and deliver them to wherever they're going, or how does that work?
Yeah, so the ADA and non-ADA paratransit service is door-to-door service. Okay, so the city has operated transit as far as I could tell, going back to some point in the 1970s. It was used mainly as a circulator for people to go from their house to shopping. Over the years, it evolved. Back when the city first started offering transit, the federal transit funds paid a significant majority of the costs associated with that. Over the years, that has kind of flipped, and where the city's general fund has had to pick up more. And so we have to constantly be looking for cost-effective ways to provide transit to our residents. Kind of jumping forward a little bit, I want to talk a little bit about transit funding challenges. Going back to 2012, this is when the city contracted with First Transit to operate both the fixed route service as well as the paratransit services within the city. The city issued an RFP, went through that process. We, at that time, were seeing a $200,000 cost increase, and so the city had to find other ways to get transit costs within budgeted amounts. In 2019, again, we're still with First Transit. They are operating our intercity fixed route services. This is the first year where we had to make some larger cuts. The first cut that's identified there is reducing the Truman 16 route. This was a route that operated between 9th and Grand and KC Mo and went out to Farview. It operated 2 routes, express routes in the morning and two routes in the afternoon. In 2019, the city made the decision to eliminate one of those routes in the morning and one in the afternoon. At that time, we also reduced the Saturday service. The city eliminated about 3 hours of service on Saturday. So the buses, instead of starting at their normal time, 6 or 7 p.m., started later in the day. We also reduced the intracity fixed route by 1 hour. At that time, the buses ran until 7 p.m. The city rolled that back to 6 p.m. As part of that, we also interlined the yellow and orange routes. So the yellow and orange routes operate from northwest Independence to northeast Independence. They were routes that were underperforming, and so the city interline them. So what that means is that there's one bus that operates both of those routes instead of having 2 separate buses, and it just drives both of those routes. So instead of having a headway of 1 hour, it had a headway of 2 hours. Then in 2020, COVID happened, and the city eliminated the Truman 16 route. So that was the last remaining morning route and last remaining PM route. At that time, the city proposed to eliminate the fixed route service. We were estimating a little over a $900,000 budget shortfall to pay for transit. So this slide and the next slide are going to kind of highlight what we presented back in 2020 when we made the recommendation to eliminate the fixed route. So as you can see, the cost, which is the blue line, the cost per mile was going up, and then you had the revenue line, the red line was decreasing, so that that gap was starting to widen. That is where these are the reasons why the city was looking to reduce costs. This slide here adds a little more information. So it still has the blue line, which is the cost per mile, and it has the revenue per mile, which is the red line. But it also adds the FTA funding that we receive, which is the green line, and then what we call the gap. So the gap is the cost minus FTA funding minus revenue. And what we saw was that the funding gap was increasing, or had increased from 2017 to 2020 by 17%. What are our primary sources of funding for transit? It's the general fund and FTA 5307 funds. That's our money that we have to work with in order to fund transit with. During COVID, there was a great deal of assistance that was provided to communities to support transit. The thinking was lost revenue and other impacts associated with COVID. You can see the city received a little over 5.1 or just under $5.2 million of one-time funding between July of 2020 and essentially June 30 of 24. All of these funds up here, so the CARES.
Mr. Cannell, hang
Yes.
on.
One question, this may be for the city manager. During this time period, was this when we kind of gave the full court press to the KCATA for help with the funding?
Yes, that is the period of time that we were seeking, help designing routes that got people where they needed to go, but also would help meet the city's budget.
So all of these funding sources, they had an expenditure deadline either in 23 or in 24. We have exhausted all of those funds as of earlier this year. So plotting this out on a graph, going back to 2017 to 24, you can see that our costs have gone up significantly. Our revenues have dropped. The gap, again, the cost minus all of the available funding sources has grown. However, when you account for the COVID funds, that gap in that time period has more than doubled. So those COVID funds really provided that lifeline for the city to continue to fund transit. So back in 2022, when we knew the end was coming of our COVID relief funds, we put together a projection of what we thought our transit needs would be. And these were communicated via the budget updates, mid-year. And if you look at 24, 25, we were looking at a need of just under $2.2 million for the general fund just to provide transit at the same level. That, again, this is our projection, or this was our projection back in 22. So taking that information, we're like, we need to get this to within budgeted amounts. So in 2023, we worked with KCATA to do a service analysis of our system. What's working, what's not working, how can we align our transit services with budgeted funds? KCATA looked at a variety of different options. I believe there was over 10 different options that were looked at. Combining routes, removing routes, decreasing frequency, everything was on the table. And as part of that, at this time, the IRIS service was in its infancy in KC mode. So that was an option that was also on the table. For those of you who aren't familiar with IRIS, IRIS is a transit service when you need it. It's a innovative proposal to provide on-demand transit that can increase mobility and get people to where they need to go. Fixed route drives along a fixed route, a fixed street route to get people to certain locations. IRIS would broaden that. So taking all of the information that KCATA had in that service analysis, we kind of broke it down into 4 scenarios that generally fit within our budgeted amounts. Those scenarios had service reductions. Those range anywhere from 40% to a 70% reduction. So you're looking at a fairly substantial reduction just to try to get it to budgeted amounts. All of those options, though, they eliminated, or all of those scenarios removed the orange-yellow route, stopped providing fixed route service on Saturday, and in some of them they had 2-hour headways.
When you say, back up if you, so number one, I'm not sure what the orange-yellow route is, so.
Yes, so the orange-yellow route, again, that serves Northwest Independence to Northeast Independence. So it serves the northern third of Independence.
Okay. And then when you say a headway, what does, define headway for me?
Yeah, so headway is the time that it takes the bus to make one trip.
Okay.
So our current headways now, it operates on 1 hour. So it leaves the transit center, it goes out, it goes to the end of its route, and then it comes right back. So that's a 1 hour headway. 2-hour headway is it's going out, and 2 hours later, it's coming back. So taking those 4 scenarios that were within our budgeted amount, we worked with KCATA to develop an RFP. That RFP was released May 1st and it closed on June 3rd. We had a pre-bid meeting right before the RFP went out. We had a great deal of interest. I think when I counted, there was 5 to 7 different transit groups that were in attendance. However, we only had 1 response. That was from our current operator, First Transit. The response, the costs that were proposed were 2 to 3 times higher than KCATA. So what I failed to mention, when they provided that, when KCATA provided that service analysis, they also estimated cost to give us an idea of what would approximately fit within our budgeted amounts. All of these scenarios, the costs were higher than our current costs. So keep in mind, our current service operates about 16,000 hours a year. And so when you're looking at a 40 to 70% reduction, you're going down anywhere from 4,500 hours a year to maybe 9,000 hours a year. So pretty significant reduction, but for that reduction, our costs were going up.
Mr.
Go
Chairman.
ahead.
So, Mr. Scannell, you think that's the reason why I only had one response is because nobody really wanted to attempt to?
I think it could be that. It could also be for a new provider to come into this market, there's a significant startup cost associated with that. With First Transit already being the current operator both here and at Johnson County, they had, in my opinion, a leg up. So taking that information, we're like, okay, how else can we slice this apple to try to get the most transit that we can? So we look for ways to trim costs. KCATA has a staff member who is an ex-First Transit employee, so he knows all of the ins and outs. We thoroughly went through that. Didn't find any ways to trim costs. There was no extra vehicles, extra staff, extra fluff in there. So we met with First Transit, and discussed with them our situation. Let's partner together. We've been together for, at this point, 12 years. Let's try to work through this. So we came up with the idea of maybe through economies of scale, meaning providing more service, meaning if they had the paratransit service, that maybe some of that could lower the cost of fixed route. They came back with a proposal, and that was actually higher than if we would have had than having paratransit separate from fixed route. So this next slide shows what that total cost would be and what the impact to the general fund would be. So it's over about $2 million more than what our budgeted amounts are. In talking with First Transit, the increases, it's insurance, labor rates, everything that we as a city are also seeing as costs go up. So you can see there'd need to be a significant inflow or increase in the general fund. So we're like, we still need to address this issue. We still need to solve this problem. So we went back to the drawing board, and in staff's opinion, there's 3 options there. You have continue to provide the 24 route along with complimentary paratransit, but then Iris is introduced citywide. The second option is, again, the 24 route, citywide paratransit, and then Iris citywide as well. And then the last is the 24 route, but then you have First Transit providing the fixed route and paratransit, and then you're supplementing a little bit with Iris. So I'm going to go through each one of those options, talk about the pros and cons, and also give some rough estimated costs. So the first option, the 24 route along with complimentary paratransit and citywide Iris. So this is the lowest cost option. There's no change to the 24 route. So the 24 route that operates today, this is the route that operates between Independence and downtown KC Mo. No change to that. No service reduction. None of that. Complimentary paratransit in the transit world only operates within 3/4 of a mile when you have a fixed route. So our fixed route is the 24 route. So complimentary paratransit would operate within 3/4 of a mile of that route. This does have a significant impact to those current ADA and non-ADA paratransit riders. It's only counted as a complimentary paratransit when your beginning trip and ending trip begin within that 3/4 of a mile buffer of that fixed route. So if you say you live within that, but you're going to someplace outside of that, it's not a complimentary paratransit trip. It's a IRIS trip. So there's a significant change to our ADA and non-ADA paratransit users who are some of the most vulnerable who use our transit services. It does eliminate the intracity fixed route service, so those riders would need to switch over to IRIS. And again, IRIS is used to pick up where we have service reductions and service frequency. This next slide shows roughly a rough estimated annual cost. And these are that do have some revenue numbers associated with it. IRIS does have a per trip cost that is $5. And you can see there the estimated amount that the general fund would need to support is just under $1.1 million. Moving to option 2, so this is the middle price option. Again, you're making no change to the 24 route, so that stays the same. Citywide paratransit, we currently operate that, and so we're making no change to that. So the ADA and non-ADA paratransit rider, they don't have to change a thing. However, we would reinstitute the paratransit fare. That was last charged before COVID. That is $3. In this option, again, the city is eliminating the intercity fixed route. So the fixed route riders would need to switch over to IRIS. And this is the cost associated with that. Little over $1.4 million. There's IRIS revenue there. There's paratransit revenue there, as well as FTA funds. And then the last option that we have, this is the most expensive option. It's more than 2 times our current budget amount. It doesn't make a change to the 24 route. It doesn't make a change to ADA or non-ADA. Intercity fixed routes remain. However, keep in mind, there's still service reductions associated with that. And the cost that I will show on the next screen, it's based on a 60% service hour reduction. So because of that reduction, you're going to have some IRIS vehicles to pick up for that service frequency. And again, this is the numbers, estimated cost, as well as revenue associated with that. So staff's recommendation is the middle option. Both the 24 route and citywide paratransit, there's no changes made. So users of both of those services will not see any change. These costs fall within budgeted amounts. IRIS is there to increase mobility, again, to take them where right now they currently can't go. And this model you have the cost shared between the rider and the city. So that's the fare in both the paratransit and Iris in order to get costs within budgeted amounts. That concludes my presentation.
Okay, thank you. Questions? Mr. Perkins?
Well, that wasn't as pleasant as our financial report.
No, it wasn't, was
Sorry.
it?
But we kind of knew this was coming, been kind of gearing up for this, for some of the shortfalls of funding. For sure. Do we know what the ridership is? What numbers we're pulling in on some of our fixed routes?
Yes, let me.
Mr. Chair, while
Yes.
Tom's pulling that up, I can fill the space just a moment. Just a reminder to the committee and those watching, this is not a situation unique to the City of Independence. Some of our peer cities, Blue Springs, Grandview, Graytown, have all dropped their transit services. Not all of those had fixed route services. Some of them have the senior adult or the disabled person services, but their KCATA routes that connect their community to the Kansas City area, they've dropped those services altogether because of the price increases as compared to the users that are utilizing that service. So just a reminder, it's not a phenomenon unique to Independence. It's one that all of us are facing in this period of time.
Yeah, I was about to ask about that because I had heard about some of that. So those other cities have discontinued the KCATA part, but they've maintained the other parts. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, for those that have paratransit or maybe a senior adult-based service, like I'm sure you're all familiar with Oats Bus, those that have those services, it's my understanding, are still sustaining those, but their version of the 24 route that would connect their community to some portion of Kansas City, Missouri proper, they have dropped that service. The managers, I think you're all familiar, the city managers of Eastern Jackson County meet monthly. We have engaged the Mid-America Regional Council and their transportation division to really take a look at region-wide here in Eastern Jackson County, where are riders trying to get to. I will say I don't think this issue is solvable without the help of Jackson County, but we're starting small with Mid-America Regional Council and getting some data-driven insights into where are users starting and ending their trips, so we could maybe take a more regional look at how we pool our limited resources to help address some of these needs.
And just to add onto that, those cities that did drop service did switch to Iris to make up for the cut in services. And in fact, there was an announcement, it was in the paper today, that KCK is looking to eliminate some routes to save $2.4 million of budget shortfall. And they're just looking at eliminating routes just to save cost. But getting back to the question about ridership, it varies a little bit, anywhere from 218,000, 220, 230,000. So before COVID, we were in the 270,000, 290,000 ridership. With COVID, it fell off. It significantly reduced. We're slowly over the last few years, getting back closer to what we were pre-pandemic.
Is that annual ridership?
Yes, sorry, yes.
And what do we charge right now for the fare?
So right now, there is no fares. So when COVID was first occurred, some of those transit funds that we received were to do zero fares. The thinking was people were using cash. That was a way to spread disease, stuff like that. And there's been a little bit more stronger push from other communities to re-implement those fares.
The meeting that the mayor and I attended probably 2 months ago now, give or take, that was one of the big conversation pieces of eliminating the zero fare for a whole host of reasons other than just funding sources.
My understanding, I think Casey Moe is still kind of the holdout on that, but talking to counterparts in Johnson County and UG and us, we're in favor of introducing the fares back.
So what was the fare before?
It was $1.50 for full fare. Reduced fare was 75 cents. And so paratransit, back before COVID, they paid $3 per trip.
And so this scenario here would reintroduce the $3 per trip?
Correct.
And then have a $5 per trip for Iris?
Correct.
One question I didn't completely understand on the first scenario that you outlined, the 3/4 mile from the 24 highway route, are you saying that that only operated within that 3/4 mile, or it didn't operate within the 3/4 mile? It only operated outside that? I didn't completely understand.
So in order for it to be a complimentary paratransit trip in the eyes of FTA, is the trip must start within 3/4 of a mile of a fixed route, so that would be the 24 route, and end within 3/4 of a mile within that route. So there's that 3/4 of a mile buffer around that route, and if you start your trip there and end your trip there, it's considered a complimentary paratransit trip, which would then be a free fare trip under today's rules.
I see. Okay.
Boy, there's just not a lot of wiggle room, is there, Mr. City Manager?
No, and this has always been the conundrum with this service. The individuals who need this and use this service are, as Tom said, some of the most vulnerable in our community. But for public transit, many of them are very limited in the options they have. I think you will recall, Councilmember Perkins and others may as well, but when the city was reviewing and proposing eliminating that service altogether in 2020, we heard from a great number of those people, and that was the consistent theme, was this is our connection to the outside world, to get to our doctor's appointments, to get to the grocery store, etc. The paradox, though, is that our ridership numbers are not such that it financially supports itself. And it's more than just not supporting, it's demands a subsidy such that, as we talk more and more about priority-based budgeting, we have to decide, are we going to divert those resources from other city services or use these funds to support something that's not as heavily used in the community? I will say I had a little bit more time to wrap my mind around this. Mr. Scannell and the Assistant City Manager gave me this presentation last week, and as I've had some time to dwell on it, change is hard. I mean, there's learned behaviors that people would have to adapt to, but I think there are some real opportunities and benefits here. Instead of looking at it as losing something, looking at maybe what we're gaining. So instead of having to find your way to one of our fixed route stops, Iris will come and pick you up at your front door. And then those fixed route services have a endpoint that may or may not be convenient to you. And so it will take you, for those who are familiar with ride shares like Uber or another platform, this would function similar to that. So I don't want to, pretend that this is a perfect solution, but it certainly, as Tom has worked on this for months, I think that's always been at the forefront of his mind of how do we ensure these members of our community that rely on this service still have a way to have mobility in the community. I may add just one more thing. I know we've had speakers at our council meetings from time to time that have really pressed for an even more robust transit system. But this is both a regional and national issue that certainly as Kansas Cityans and as Americans, we really like our vehicles, and our communities have been built around that. And again, talking about learned behaviors, getting people to switch their mindsets from using their personal vehicle to get to where they're going to investing in and utilizing a mass transit system is something that is going to take time. It's probably not a quick shift in mindset, but until you get more demand and ridership, you're going to have these issues of there are just some certain overhead costs to operating the system.
It's always been a strong challenge of conversation, especially with the 64053 area code that is very vulnerable when we cost share and work with, when we work with workforce development, with community service league, getting those folks to the jobs where they need to go. And then most importantly, also the conversations that I do recall having, I had it with Mrs. Perkins, who is a social worker, and I understood her thoughts and feelings on that quite strongly. So,
Mm-hmm.
those conversations are continually being had to work with those that need this service. So when does this come to the council for consideration?
I believe this needs to be approved in October.
Correct. So our schedule was to have this on the council agenda for October 21st. I think we were talking having the same presentation presented to the full council on October 14th.
At the study session.
Yep. One thing to keep in mind with this is kind of like Zach alluded to, this Iris is flexible. It can be adjusted, changed based on riders. So if we roll this out for 6 months and we start to see, hey, we need to maybe make this change, maybe we roll back fares or other things or other little tweaks that we can make to still try to keep that within our budgeted amounts.
Question I had was, you talked about 217,000 rides or something to that effect. How many individual people are using this service?
Really can't estimate that because right now they don't track each rider. But looking back at some information that we had, we estimate back before COVID with 270,000 to 290,000 rides. That was probably 3,000 to 4,000 unique users.
Okay, well, I think we've got our work cut out for us on this.
Got a couple more things.
Sure.
Thank you, Chairman. Long-term thinking. Mr. City Manager, we've discussed this very low level on, is it possible to gain any kind of financial assistance from the federal government to help plug in this directly as opposed to going to KCATA, Mid-America Regional Council? And it goes almost more into future thinking. Does it make sense to have a lobbyist to work for our behalf in Washington?
I think having a presence in Washington, both for this issue and others, has a lot of merit. As the 5th largest city in the state, 2nd largest in the metro here on the Missouri side, I think there are enough diversity of issues. I could go on and on, our electric utility, et cetera. I think having that service representing us and hawking these federal programs and grant opportunities, et cetera, is really important. And again, I don't want to allude that this could be a quick fix, but I'm encouraged by these conversations that are happening among these Eastern Jackson County communities, because I think with the collective power, we can probably pursue some options out there to help pool the limited resources to design a system that's more functional for the people of Eastern Jackson County.
Well, I certainly don't want to add the expense and the dirty word of lobbyists to another set of things we work through. But if there's a cost benefit and that could bring some good back to us, that may be something to look forward to. The second thing is, as we're moving forward towards FIFA, in a couple more years, I'm sure we're not there as a city yet to think about what that transportation service within our cities is going to look like, the strain, the stress that's going to take place, and also what financial resources KCATA or the state or the federal government may give us to help offset some of those costs. Quite a few of us was in the meeting about a month ago discussing just topically on the impact of what's going to happen to our region, and it was pretty mind-blowing, the intensity of the people that are going to be here, the crowds that are going to be here, the security, all of the needs. So any food for thought on how we are going to start thinking about that process?
Again, as you just said, I'm encouraged that the conversation seems to be growing at the regional level, because I think that's where it has to occur. These issues aren't going to recognize a municipal boundary and stop just because Kansas City meets Independence or vice versa. So transit is a massive part of that, but whether that is bus transit or pedestrian traffic, people are going to find a way to get to the stadiums and to the Fan Fest events, and it is imperative upon us to ensure that that happens in the least disruptive and most safe way possible. But while we don't have specific answers on that yet, those conversations and other similar issues like public safety, public health, housing, those are starting to germinate.
Well, keep us informed and let us know how we can plug in.
Certainly will.
Okay. All right, well, we'll look forward to the study session on October 14th, and where I'm sure we'll have a robust conversation on this topic. So appreciate the primer on this. So that's good. All right, next thing on our agenda is to schedule the next meeting. So our normal next meeting would be when? Can anybody tell me that? We met in August, so.
October 16th?
Or would it be November?
No.
I'm just thinking. Would it be like November 20th? Is that what?
Well, that works for me.
I'm just. 20 what? Yeah, probably, but that would be the day before Thanksgiving, so that would be pretty tough, I think. What, from a financial standpoint, for financial reports and things, do you have a recommendation in terms of when? Okay, so we probably meet in November, sometime, and then meet in January for the audit. Okay. Well, my inclination would be like November to the 20th, which puts us a week before Thanksgiving. I'd like to take it out of Thanksgiving week, that, for staff's benefit. I think that makes a lot of sense. Does the 20th sound like a good possibility? Okay. All right, we'll let Lindsay or
3:30?
whoever email us with a schedule and get that on our schedule, so that's great. The other item that I put on the agenda today was to talk about next projects for management analysts. I developed I'm getting quite a list here of possibilities. So I wanted to have some conversation. Let me just talk about what I've got on my list and then see, Councilman Perkins, what your thoughts are or if Mr. City Manager or Andrew, certainly, if you have anything you want to weigh in on here. But the items I have on my list are animal control, work comp and safety, Santa Caligana, like a cost benefit analysis for Santa Caligana across the board, not just for the chamber, but what city's part is that, and other sources. Utility billing, I think we've had some things come up recently with utility billing that have given us some concerns. And then we've had a fair amount of discussion about rental ready as well. I'm inclined to hold off on rental ready for a bit because I think staff I know is working on some things relative to that. So I'd like to see that first. Any thoughts you have on any of those or anything else, Mr. Perkins?
Nothing particular. Question for Andrew, Mr. Fraser. What's in your workflow now?
Right now, I'm working on the enterprise funds. We had talked about that previously. Working with municipal services, trying to go through all that. It's keeping me pretty busy, but.
Okay. What are you feeling, Mr. Chairman, your top priority ones? I do like the animal shelter review.
Yeah, that would be a top priority, or utility billing. I know there's been some questions come up recently relative to utility billing and some concerns about some of that. So I'd probably lean more towards utility billing first, and then maybe go to animal control after that. That would be kind of my. Does that seem like okay? So as I know you don't know exactly how long things take.
Sure. Yeah.
And things, but that gives you kind of
Absolutely.
a direction to head, and some of the other stuff we'll have to bring in, as we have opportunity.
So utility billing priority over animal shelter.
I think so
Okay.
at the moment, yeah.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
this may be for the city manager. In between things you're not doing, are you able to, in no hurry at all, but maybe put something a little bit more formal on what lobbyist work would entail from Washington, and some of the costs and the benefits for that, and what we can possibly be leaving on the table there?
I would be happy to do that, and I don't see a reason I couldn't have that for that November 20th meeting to share with this group.
Okay, great, thank
That'd
you.
be helpful. Yeah. Okay. All right, well, City Manager, do you have anything else that you want to?
I do not, thank you, though.
All right, I'm looking around, I don't see anybody else trying to raise the floor, so with that, we will adjourn and until November the 20th, and we'll go from there. Thank you very much, everybody.